Bitte tu mir nicht weh!
I won't hurt you. You're safe with me. Do you speak English?
Germany, May 1945. The war was ending, but for Anneliese Hartmann, suffering had only just begun. In a shattered village near the Elbe River, she knelt in the ruins of her family's bakery, searching desperately for crumbs of grain to survive. Her hands trembled as she sifted through dust and broken bricks, not from fear, but from starvation. She weighed barely 78 pounds. Hunger had hollowed her body, but somehow it had not yet extinguished her will to live. Once she had been a teacher, full of dreams and purpose. Now she was just another forgotten soul in a land reduced to ash. Her family was gone, lost to war, grief and silence that no prayer could fill. Her father died in the bakery cellar during a bombing raid. Her mother slowly faded away, consumed by sorrow. Her brother never returned from Stalingrad. One by one the people she loved vanished, leaving her alone. For days she hid beneath the ruins, surviving on rainwater and scraps. The world above had changed, but she had no strength left to face it. When she finally emerged, the sunlight felt foreign, almost cruel. American soldiers had arrived. Trucks filled the streets. Voices echoed in a language she didn't understand. To her they were not saviors, only strangers in a broken world where survival was never guaranteed. Then she saw him, a soldier standing still among the chaos, watching her, Sergeant William Barker. He had seen war's horrors, but something about this fragile woman digging in silence stopped him cold. He approached slowly, asking what she searched for. She didn't understand his words, but she showed him a handful of dust mixed with grain. That single gesture told him everything. This was hunger beyond words. Without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a chocolate ration. To him it was simple. To her it was unimaginable. Food had become a memory, not a reality. She stared at it, frozen. Years of fear whispered that it was a trick. But then he broke a piece and ate it himself, proving it was safe. In that moment, something shifted. Fear began to loosen its grip. Her hand moved slowly, almost trembling with disbelief as she took the chocolate. The moment it touched her lips, her eyes closed. Sweetness flooded her senses, awakening a hunger so deep it felt almost painful. She tried to eat slowly, to hold on to the moment, but her body betrayed her. Her hands shook violently. This was more than food. It was life returning, piece by fragile piece. William watched in silence. He saw not just starvation but dignity, something unbroken inside her. Without saying much, he gave her more of his rations, then quietly walked away, leaving her stunned. That night, she held onto the empty wrapper as if it were proof the moment had been real. For the first time in months, she slept with something unfamiliar in her chest. Hope. The next day he came back, and the day after that, each time bringing food, sitting beside her as she ate. No demands, no expectations, just quiet, consistent kindness. Through a translator he learned her name. Anneliese, a teacher. Alone. Everything she once loved had been taken by the war. She had survived, but survival had come at a terrible cost. William made a choice that could have cost him everything. He began bringing her real food from the army kitchens, bread, eggs, even warm soup. Not out of duty, but because he couldn't walk away. Day by day her strength returned. Her cheeks slowly filled, her steps steadied. But more importantly, the fear in her eyes began to fade, replaced by something fragile but powerful. Trust. She began to speak, slowly learning his language, while he learned hers. In the middle of ruins they built something unexpected, a connection that neither war nor hatred could fully explain. One evening she finally asked him in broken English, "Why? You help me." He paused, searching for words, then simply said, "Because you needed help." To her, it was a truth she had never known. His answer stayed with her long after he left that evening. In a world that had taught her strength meant survival alone, his kindness felt almost unreal, like something from a life she no longer believed existed. As days turned into weeks, their bond deepened. They sat together in the quiet ruins, sharing stories in broken words. Pain, loss, and memory became the language they both understood. She told him about her classroom, the laughter of children, the smell of fresh bread from her father's bakery. He told her about wide Oklahoma fields and skies that never seemed to end. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to imagine a future. Not just survival, but living, and somehow that future now included him. But time was not on their side. Orders came. William would soon leave Germany. The thought of losing him awakened a fear deeper than hunger, the fear of being alone again. One afternoon, sitting in the ruins, silent tears rolled down her face. "When you go," she whispered, "I will have nothing again." Her voice carried the weight of everything she had lost. The words struck him hard. He had tried not to think about leaving, but now it was unavoidable. He looked at her, really looked, and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Come with me," he said softly. She didn't understand at first. America. It sounded impossible, like a dream too distant to reach. But he meant every word. There were rules, barriers, and endless complications. Enemy civilians weren't meant to become part of soldiers' lives. But for him, none of that mattered anymore. A week later, in the broken remains of her past, he asked her to marry him. No ring, no grand speech, just a promise. She said yes before he could even finish asking. They were married in a small church that had somehow survived the war. No family, no celebration, just quiet vows spoken between two people who had found each other in the ruins of everything. Days later he had to leave. They stood together as the convoy prepared to move. "I will come for you," he promised. She nodded, holding back tears, choosing faith over fear. Months passed. She waited through hunger, cold, and endless paperwork. Each letter from him became her lifeline, each word a reminder that her new life was still waiting for her. At last, approval came. She crossed the ocean alone, leaving behind the ashes of her past. When she saw him again in America, she knew she had truly survived. Life was not easy. She faced suspicion, whispers, and the weight of being the enemy. But she endured, just as she always had, determined to build something stronger than her past. With time, love replaced doubt. She became part of his family, his world. The woman who once searched for crumbs now sat at a table filled with food, surrounded by people who called her home. They built a life together, children, laughter, and quiet evenings under endless skies. The scars of war never vanished, but they no longer defined her. Years later, she returned to her old town. The ruins were gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. The past no longer lived there, it only lived within her. She realized then that she had not just been saved. She had chosen to live, to trust, to love again. And that choice had changed everything. It all began with a single act of kindness, a piece of chocolate offered in silence. In a world consumed by war, two strangers chose compassion. And from that moment, an entire lifetime was born.